Hello, my name is Jamie. Today I'm joined with Emma and we're going to be asking some questions to Mr. Adam Rees from the Huggard Foundation about homelessness within Cardiff.
Yeah, I'm Adam. It's very good of you to have me here. I was here last year speaking with students going around to different classes. So this is a nice way of talking to a lot of people about the work we do about homelessness more generally and about the work of the Huggard.
Yeah, that's good. So we've prepared a few questions just to get a general understanding of what you do. My first question is, what are some of the common reasons that people in Cardiff become homeless, and what are some misconceptions that you wish the public better understood about these causes?
Some in-depth question straight away, Jamie. I think reasons for homelessness are pretty common across the UK, not necessarily specific to Cardiff, but always the main thing that people say is a breakdown in relationship. And that can be many different things. That can be partners, and usually men, leaving the accommodation. That could be domestic violence, where the female has to, usually, as the woman has to leave the relationship. It can be coming back after prison release. So what tends to happen after people are released from prison is they will go and stay with someone for a bit, but it doesn't last. It's hard, yeah? And they will end up becoming homeless. And that is the general reason. There's addiction mixed into that, use of drugs, becoming difficult to stay accommodated, mental health issues. So that, so all of those things are in the mix around the reasons that people are becoming homeless. I've been doing this for 30 years. You can see the lines on my face. But, and when I first started, it was really about those issues of addiction, prison release, quite a bit around armed forces that you don't see really anymore. The armed forces have really got their act together about supporting people who are homeless. What you've had, though, in the last little period is affordability being an issue, poverty, pure poverty. And that's not about people who have addictions necessarily or prison, have left prison or things like that. It's just an affordability issue. They can't afford the accommodation, and that has crept up more and more to be a reason that you will find people who are homeless. And we work now with people who are just coming to us because they've lost accommodation because they can't afford the rent. And that's a change. So you get that group where you're that normal idea of why people have lost their accommodation that people have in their mind's eye, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the growth of people just being about people who are poor and can't afford housing because housing goes up, and wages and income and benefits don't go at the same rate. Misconceptions. I think the one big misconception I always think about it is about homelessness, about rough sleeping people living on the streets, that I think it would be great if people could get their head around, is that nobody wants to live on the streets. I think there's sometimes that people have chosen this idea of being on the streets and outside of society and living off benefits, and that is a good life. If you go around it in the cold and you feel the pavements and the doorsteps that people are sleeping on, you never really think that. And my experience is that anyone who genuinely comes in to accommodation, something that they want and want to keep, they never want to go back. They never want to go back out. And I think that is in people's mind's eye, really, sometimes the public, that people have chosen that life, and it's not really a choice. I think that's the big thing I would say. On the other side, I think not everybody that you see out begging and asking for money is necessarily homeless. And so that's the other side of it, really. It is people are that money isn't necessarily going to the things that people think that it's going to. And there's quite a bit of organised crime, exploitation tied up in that begging aspect as well. So those two, on one side, people aren't choosing it. On the other side, be wary of people who are saying they're homeless or begging or things like that. So it's the difficult path to tread, but they're the two misconceptions that I think, good to explore.
Would you say that more recently, as the cost of living's become more difficult to deal with, that you're experiencing more families coming to your foundation?
Yeah, so more families are homeless. We don't work with families. We work with single people, so we don't work with children partly because we're working with people who are very complex. But families and anyone with kids will be the local authority will have a duty to house them. But absolutely, Jamie, that has expanded the number of people in temporary housing, and you hear terrible stories of kids who've been living in temporary housing for a long, long period of time, waiting for something permanent. And a lot of money is going into that temporary accommodation to house people, purely because of poverty, basically. And that growth in families, we don't deal with it specifically, but it's absolutely happening. And it's one of the tragedies of the UK today, I would say. Yeah, because those kids who are in temporary accommodation, and there'll be students, I'm sure, here who've experienced that, absolutely. That's a tough start to life, and it's really tough to live in that situation. Yeah.
It's entirely unfair as well.
Yeah.
Because it's not their fault that they've gotten into this situation.
No, and you think, I grew up in Australia, so it's my Australian accent, a long time ago. But you take for granted some of the things you get as a kid and things like that, and child poverty, living in temporary accommodation, it really does, you have to be really strong to come out of that, and it really does affect people's life chances. Yeah.
Yeah.
This kind of links on to my question. So how does the Huggard Centre support individuals moving from emergency and temporary accommodation to long-term stability, and also gaining employment, permanent housing, and getting mental health support?
Fantastic question. Really hard to do. Huggard is kind of like the safety net of Cardiff. So we do all of the out of hours and emergency accommodation. So we get a lot of calls at night, people calling up saying, I've got nowhere to go, I can't stay in my house, I'm fleeing domestic violence or things like that. And they can come to us. So we're dealing a lot with that emergency end. So we have about 50 beds for emergency accommodation. And that isn't really about, we're going to get you permanent housing, we're going to get you a job, we're going to solve all of your health issues. That is about an emergency response to you being homeless. So what we do is you can come in, you can have a warm, safe place, you can get food, we have nurses 5 days a week, you can get access to all sorts of things. A kind of emergency. We're not really looking for that group to say, and we're going to get you a job and we're going to get you, permanent housing. That really is an emergency response, and that's kind of our main function, I would say. But a secondary bit that we do, which is more about what you're talking about, is that sort of breaking the cycle of homelessness. So what we're really looking to do is for that group that we hold on to longer, and we have about 40 self-contained rooms, and then we have some housing across the city that people go to. And what we're really trying to do is get people out of homelessness, because I've worked in homelessness for 30 years, but you don't want to live in homelessness. You don't want to stay in a hostel for a long period of time. That is a place to do, to get things you need to move on, and you really only recover when you live in the community, you have your house, your kids, if you have kids, go to school, you go down the shops, you buy your own stuff, and you're part of that community. If you're within homelessness, in the homeless system, you're not really recovering. So what we do, we're kind of the first step. So I don't think we're the first step of people getting out into permanent accommodation, really. So what we're looking to do is kind of really, in these areas, people have a deficit of skills. So what we're looking to do is make sure they have basic skills that we might take for granted. Digital inclusion, can they read? Can they cook a little bit? Can they shop? Can they budget? And you'll be surprised, can they keep their room clean? Can they pay rent? So these are skills that we might take for granted, and it's usually a deficit of skills in part that has led to people being in a situation. Because going back to Jamie's question about why do people become homeless, two people going along, they might be totally the same, one becomes homeless, one doesn't. Often it's about that they don't have the skills or the resilience to hold on to that accommodation. So we're really building those skills. We're trying to build confidence in people. Their confidence is dented. They don't have a lot of self-love. They don't think a lot of themselves. So we're trying to build that up with positive, because they've usually had a lot of very traumatic experiences. So we're trying to build up that positivity, and that's just about doing nice things, you know, being part of our cooking program where they learn to cook, doing activities, going on trips, you know, nice stuff that we take, playing sport, exercising. You know, you feel good if you exercise. When I do occasionally, so you feel good. But all those things. So we're trying to build up that, and then deal with their health issues. That's a big part, chronic illness. But then also build up positive networks. So if you think about your friends and your family and the people you have who support you and have that allow you to exist in the world, we kind of got to build that up for people because they don't really have that. So who is going to help them? I talk about functional relationships, so they help them out, versus what I would say is dysfunctional, where they're going to people who exploit them, take money, you know, selling them drugs, things like that. So we're trying to spin that around. And it's tough to do because people have, like you said, mental health issues. They don't have a lack of money. They don't feel very well of themselves. But really it's about step by step showing progress. And the other thing to do is we just involve lots of people in that, professionals. So I think part of the issue is everything is stretched in the UK, in Cardiff, so access to getting a GP, getting into mental health services, getting drug and alcohol treatment, that stuff is available, but it's still, you've got to push and push and push to do. So really our job is, I talk about fast and slow lanes. So the people that we have come in our emergency accommodation, they've come here because they're poor, but actually they've got a lot of skills. They're in work. We just need to give them a little helping hand and they'll be on their way, get some accommodation. Then there's those people in the slower lane, we've got to do work with them, involve professionals bit by bit. And what we're really looking to do is then move them on to accommodation where the next step is some accommodation which is less supported than us. We're 24 hours, we've got got staff on site to do everything, then they move to the next stage and then the next stage. So for Huggard, I'd love to say we got loads of people into jobs and all of that, and that is what the aim is, but we're like the start of that journey really, and I try not to give people the false impression that, you know, everyone comes through, gets a job and gets a house in the country from us. They don't. They get the next step away from homelessness. And critically what we're trying to do is just, as I said, enable them with the skills, the networks, the confidence, the support around them that gets them to that next stage. Make sense?
Yeah.
You spoke about some complex issues regarding mental health and addiction and trauma. I was wondering, what are some of the largest challenges that Huggard faces with these individuals with more complex needs?
That's a really good question, Jamie. We're getting people who, at the really complex end, we're getting people who have such a long history of trauma, going back into childhood, often mixed up with, you know, lack of accommodation, sometimes being in care, not knowing their parents, or having been given up by their parents, going through the criminal justice system back and forth. So you get this like trauma on trauma on trauma on trauma, and that might be 20, 30 years of being traumatised in that way, mixed in with addiction, mixed in with mental health issues, and unpicking that and to helping that person, motivating that person to make the changes they need to get out in the world, to get work, start a family. Sometimes it's taking, as long as that trauma has been to unpick it. So I think often it's difficult for staff because you can't just click your fingers and make things better. It is really a long-term process, sometimes with counselling and therapy. But clients, at the really complex end, and this is not everybody, but at the really complex end, the motivation to do that is not strong. And you're in an urban environment, things like drugs and alcohol are available to you. You don't have positive support from your family or from friends around you. And so I think that motivation to change, when all of that is around you, in an environment which has got 90 people in, like a hostel, that is really, really tough. So I think I would say that's the toughest thing. And I think what is difficult is often the way that the system is structured, and it's no one's fault really, is people have to go to appointments. They have to, you've got a GP appointment, you've got to go to it, you've got to make a doctor's appointment, you've got to go to A&E, you've got to go to your mental health appointment, you've got to go to this. And that's normal, but tough sometimes for our clients, and less and less, since COVID actually, less and less I think it is about meeting the person where they're at. So outreach is a term that you might hear, that you outreach to people, you go out to where they are. It's something about rough sleeping, that you go out to where that person is sleeping to help them. More and more what you need is services that will reach out to people where they are to really help them. And that's what we have, a great service called CAVAS, which is the Inclusion Health Service. So nurses, GPs, other people who work in health coming out to work with people, and that really makes a huge difference. Probation more. That's what our centre is set up to do as well, is just to be a place where we don't do everything. We just have other people coming out, come and see our guys, come and work with them, because that for staff is pretty demotivating. I think you see someone, you've done a piece of work with them. This doesn't happen a lot, but you definitely see those people coming back, or they've gone to prison and things like that. So I'd say that's a really tough part of the job. But on the other side, if you really help someone out and they get out of it and they go and and people do go into work, many people, most people we don't see again. Sometimes the problem with this work is you see the people that don't succeed, so you always get the people who are not failures, but the people who haven't succeeded necessarily. And those people that you've done really well with, they're away, they're living their best life. Yeah. So that's a challenge, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my next question is, what can young people in the wider community do to help reduce homelessness in Cardiff? And how can they make financial donations to the Huggard Centre? And why are these donations so important and what they go towards?
So what can young people do around homelessness? That is a really good question. I'll have to have a little think about it. I think there's a system that's set up, and you can feel as an individual quite disempowered that you can do anything. I just think the best thing that people can do, really, and this is also better than, finances are good, donating stuff is good, but I think actually the most important thing is people they're empathetic to people's situation. They're not judgmental. Smile at people if they're on the streets, have a little chat, engage people, look people in the eyes, acknowledge that they're there, that they're human, they're in a bad situation. And I think that empathy and understanding of the people, that this can happen to you, can happen to people, can happen to you, And it's not necessarily, as we talked about, people had really traumatic lives from when they were kids often. It's not people's fault necessarily, you said it, Jamie. And to not be judgmental about that. But on the other hand, also, do it in a way that is ambitious for people. And what I mean by that is people won't exist in that situation all their lives. We really want to be ambitious for what they can do, to get into work, to do that. So I think it's always thinking that we're empathetic towards where people are, but we really think, actually, as a society, we can help you out. We can make things better for you. So it's being empathetic, being ambitious for people. I think the other thing I would say is, this might sound slightly controversial, is if you're the victim of antisocial behaviour from people on the streets, or there's behaviour that's unacceptable, use the police, call it out. Don't think just because somebody's in a bad situation they should behave in a certain way. It's really important that we set, that we are, part of what we're doing is making people responsible citizens. There's a certain way of behaving. So you can be empathetic to where people are at, but also be ambitious and say, actually, certain stuff is not acceptable no matter what your background. So that's all about attitudinal stuff, really. It's about thinking of yourself as a citizen. How am I going to act to make the world a better place? That's what I would ask of young people. They can give money as well, of course. What was your second part of your question?
Oh yeah, where do the donations go towards?
So Huggard we're a centre. We're open 365 days a year, Christmas, everything. And the centre really is run mainly off donations. And I'll talk a little bit about that. We run housing as well, as I've talked about, emergency housing, and that is mainly funded through, we charge rent, and we are funded by the council to do that stuff. So we've got almost two separate things we're doing. And funding, big and small, all goes towards the running of the centre mainly. And the centre is about providing, we do two warm meals a day. We run lots of activities. We have a harm reduction hub, which is about substance use and about people being able to come in there with their drug issues and talk about that and things like that. It's about the place being warm, keeping the lights on, and all of that stuff. So we have bigger funders to do that. And what we use smaller donations to do is to do projects, really, that I talked about, which is, so we have a digital inclusion program. So we try and recondition laptops. We run activities, sports activities, so it's about equipment for that. We have a garden, so we have gardening projects, and we teach people to grow their own food, although you don't want to look at the garden at the moment because it looks terrible. It's all overgrown. So all of those things, we put money towards different projects within the centre. It just makes the centre not be just a place where people are coming and sitting and watching TV. It's those added extra things that we do. We try and plan a trip and do some trips away with people just to get out of, because they exist in Cardiff pretty much all their life. In fact, they exist a lot in Butte Town and the city centre where we are. They don't really go anywhere, just to open people's eyes about what's possible. So we fund trips in that way. So lots of things, and because it's a centre that relies a lot on fundraising, it is like a daily part of what you do is to try and raise money to do that. So we're super careful with the money. We have a very small, quite a small charity doing a big job, I think, but we've got a small number of people who are running the centre of it, so that a lot of the money doesn't go to administration or things like that. It goes directly to the clients. And we empower the clients. A big part of what we're trying to do is empower the clients to run. So they cook all the food, just got a bit of people overseeing it, support with the donations, and so help in running the centre. So it goes to supporting them as well. And how you donate, I think was one of your questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Yeah, I don't know the Just Giving thing, but there's a link. There's a link. And yeah, we run it through Just Giving, but that's available on our website, which is huggard.org.uk. Yeah. And we're a charity, so, we're ordered by the Charity Commission, and it's good. We're not a soup run, we're not doing basic stuff, we're doing high level professional interventions with people, and that we want to ensure that what we're doing is a very high standard, so people are getting really good quality things, good quality food, good quality interventions, good quality medical support. So money goes towards that. I think it was a question about what are the outcomes, was there? That was one of your questions, wasn't it?
Yeah. One of my questions would be, what are some potential changes that you could see so after somebody finishes in Huggard, the next step that they would take, what are some changes that could be made regarding that next step to improve chances of them not going back to the streets?
Good question. Another good question. It's a very deep philosophical question. So we are doing the basic stuff, and the next stage is usually that they are living more independently. And I think what would really improve that bit is, so there's a real shortage of one bedroom self-contained accommodation in Cardiff, and it's not going to the affordable housing is difficult. So the supply of that is one of the big issues where someone has their own front door, they can get away from things, they're not living in a communal setup. But Cardiff Council, in fairness, are doing a pretty good job of trying to build that stuff. But that is one of the issues. And the other issue alongside that is, on that next step, is who is supporting that person. Part of the challenge is when in a big setup like ours, there's lots of people to support you in a way. We've got 24-hour staffing, there's someone there all the time. When you go out of that, there's not that level of support. If you fall down, sometimes you're going all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah.
To start again. And I think if we could do more stuff upstream, where we could push that support upstream a bit. So we try and do that at Huggard, where we have alumni of Huggard, where you can come back and we can do a little bit with you to support you to go back. Don't come back to the beginning. Let's do a little bit of work with you. Often it's about letters that people have got, or struggling financially, or things like that. So part of our next stage of what we're looking at is, can we do something a bit with people who are further upstream so they don't come all the way back, because it's a waste of time and it's very traumatic for the individual. But I would say that access to accommodation, access to mental health support, I think, which is really stretched, and a lot of people require it and aren't getting it, and then access to that further support upstream.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just wanted to ask, do you think that there's any stigma that people who have already gone through the process of with the Huggard Centre sort of coming back, if they've sort of found themselves back in a similar situation of living on the streets, do you think it's difficult for them to come back again?
I think it's too easy for them to come back sometimes, because I think they come back because it's easy to do, because we've got lots of stuff for them. And I think the other side of that is true. There is a stigma, there is I've failed, I haven't succeeded, and we definitely get that dipping in and not really liking it and going out. I think that is a big issue around stigma, though. I think people are reluctant to take up help, Emma, when they actually should have taken up help much earlier, and they let things get really bad, and then they end up losing their accommodation or things like that because people don't want to admit. And I think that is that's the big issue almost, is those people who are living in their own accommodation somewhere but are really, really, really struggling. Because when they come to us, we know about it, we've got all the support around them, we can put stuff in place. But when they're living by themselves. So there's a real stigma around those people who've never touched homeless services. And there's definitely a stigma about coming down to Huggard. I think, oh, I'm having to go to Huggard. That's, you know, what's happened to me. And I think that's one of the things that, to your question about what can young people do, if they see someone, or they've got a parent or they've got a family member who's really struggling, go and get help from the council or a community hub, or talk about it early. Talk about the issue early, because you can nip it there, and you don't, because it's tough when you start right at the beginning, and you have to work yourself up. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate being here.
Thank you. It's been good having you.